You know, Your Honor, I'd said before we broke that I had concluded my direct examination of Mr. Klug, but there were a couple of things I'd neglected to raise with him, and Mr. Albee has graciously agreed that I should be permitted to continue my direct examination for a short while. So.
Correct.
That is correct, yes.
You see the S18 and S19. Mr. Klug, I'm going to show you these notes that you provided me that are marked Exhibit S18 and S19, and I ask you if you can identify those, sir.
Those are my notes that I had written back in 2002.
And how is it that you knew about writing those? I mean, how is it you now know that those were notes you wrote in 2002?
I had found these notes after I'd cleaned out my compliance files. These were notes that I had taken after I had talked to Quinn Yorton back in '02 when I had called the DA's office. So I had made a record of the date that I had called.
I looked at those notes. I couldn't really quite read what they said or make any sense out of what they meant. So Can you tell the jury what they say and what they meant?
Sure. Do you want me to read them?
Well, at the time that you made these notes, were these matters still fresh in your mind at that time?
Yes, they were.
And what was your purpose in making these notes?
Well, no, I don't. I withdraw it.
What was your purpose in making these notes?
The purpose of these notes was to put down in my memory what I would say if the DA if they called or if I needed to come when I had got involved in the case.
So this isn't what you did say, it's what you would have said if I had called you back in 2002.
Correct.
Well, by all means, I want to hear. What would you have told me if I had called you back in 2002?
Okay, this was March 21st of 2002 at 4:10 in the afternoon. These notes say, he kept saying how she was unstable, that a sick feeling in the stomach, Quinn Yorton that I recommended that I would call.
Excuse me, just a moment. Who had the sick feeling in the stomach?
Well, actually, sick feeling in the stomach was me having to get involved with this.
So you've got written there the words sick feeling in the stomach?
Yes.
And that was referring to your sick feeling in your stomach?
Correct.
Okay. So if there's some other notation like that, and it doesn't indicate who it's referring to, if you could let us know parenthetically or somehow who it's talking about. So what's the next notation?
Yes, then the next notation is a comment that people have a tendency to open up to me. We talked for a long time in the lobby of the hotel. That would be myself talking with Mark Jensen. He told me how unhappy he was about his marriage. Conversation about spouses after bar closing conversation. Can't remember everything. Let's see. Mark tried to become my friend. Premeditated.
What was premeditated, if you remember?
Premeditated would be Mark thinking about killing his wife.
Okay, go on.
Stiefel blueprint. And then it says Friday and Saturday. And then I have Dawn Cooper's name written. Guy talk in the bar. Hotel, 2 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. after bar. Saturday in lobby, drinking coffee. Mark talked about getting rid of his wife and how Mark talked about killing his wife. Mark Jensen unloaded on us, gave his story about his wife affairs. He wanted to get rid of her. Psycho.
And do you know what the word psycho makes reference to?
Psycho would be his, I believe, his wife.
That's what Mark Jensen used to describe his wife?
That's correct. And then and it says next Monday, so that would be the Monday after the conference. useless here. I don't, that must be talking about me not being able to concentrate on work. Thought was odd. Mark and I talked every few weeks, would call every so often. She was on depression, so I'm assuming depression medicine. He was saying, Mark was saying Benadryl OD, Benadryl overdose, that get out of bed. So I'm assuming that she was not able to get out of bed. And then I put that he was my boss from 10/1 of 98 to 3/15 of 99. It says talk to people, convention, uneasy about, and that goes beyond that. 10/1 of 01. Weekend, Kelly came up to set up the office here. It says Dawn Cooper were best friends of Kelly Labonte. I called her at Rockford in Baird. So I had Dawn had left Stiefel Nicholas and had worked for Robert Baird at the time. And then it says called, guy talk. She remembered conversation. Then,
Well, let's stop for a moment.
Okay.
So you had spoken to Dawn Cooper?
yes,
And when you say she remembered conversation, what conversation did she remember?
you know, I'm in the lobby of the hotel.
Well, in the lobby of the hotel, what were you talking about?
That was when Mark and I were talking about spouses.
So Dawn Cooper remembered you and Mark talking about spouses?
Correct.
But at that point, was Mark talking about killing his spouse or just talking about not?
Objection to what Don Cooper was thinking.
You'll have to rephrase your question for starters.
Do you remember what it was that Dawn Cooper had related to you that she could recall?
Dawn had gone through a divorce, so I think she was talking about how
Objection. It's it's speculation.
Do you recall?
yes.
Go ahead.
So tell us what you recall her telling you. She remembered.
I remember that Dawn had told me that she had gone recently through a divorce and that she was talking about her situation. You know, so I think at that point she opened up.
I object to him interpreting other people's statements.
The objection is sustained.
So what was the next entry on the notation that you had there? Or was that the end of it?
That was the end of it. That's all the notes that I have.
And you say, when did you discover those notes?
These notes were discovered about a month ago.
And you brought them with you the other day?
That's correct.
And at the time that you wrote those notes to the matters that you were writing about were still relatively fresh in your mind?
Yes, they were.
And you were preparing those notes in the event I or some other law enforcement agents contacted you?
That's correct.
I'd move for those documents into evidence. Your Honor, I have no further questions. What is the S?
S19 and S18.
Subject to cross-examination, these notes were.
Yes.
All right.
No further questions.
Cross-examination. May I see the note?
Mr. Klug, you testified on July 30th, 2007 in this matter, correct?
At the evidentiary hearing, yes.
I am correct? True?
Please repeat your question.
Yes. You testified on July 30th, 2007, and one reason I may ask a leading question in a particular case is there may be information, I mean, this isn't one of those cases, but there may be information that we're either supposed to go into or not go into. And my question was, did you testify? And so if you can answer yes in a situation like that, but you know, sometimes volunteering the information at an evidentiary hearing could be problematic.
I don't understand what counsel's saying.
Sure.
Well, I think he's suggesting that the witness just answer the question that's asked.
That it is, and I'm trying to explain what could be a problem with it.
All right.
Not very well, apparently, but
Well, I just didn't understand. I don't know.
Try to confine your answer to what is asked of you.
Yes, sir.
And on that date, I asked you, Mr. Klug,
Excuse me, counsel, please refer to the page and, so I know what part of the transcript you're referring to.
well, I'll do that in a second.
Well, no, actually, when you're going to be asking someone a previous statement, the first thing you make reference to is the time, the page and the line, so I can follow it.
I will do that in a moment. If I'm showing it to him, he may just acknowledge it. All right, it's fine. I'll just do the page. It's really not a problem. Mr. Klug, at that time, were you asked?
No,
And this is page,
Okay.
Mr. Chambois, just hold on, please. Page 24, line 3. You were asked, Mr. Klug, do you have any notes about any conversation you had with Mr. Jensen during that time? Do you recall that?
I recall it.
And you answered, no, I don't. Right?
That's correct.
And that is, and when I referred to conversation, it meant to the conversation that you've related in November 1998, correct?
That's correct.
And you said you had no notes, right?
That's correct.
And then you were asked again on page 29, line 6, did you produce every document you have relating to your activities in November 1998? And your answer was yes. You recall that?
Yes.
And then you were asked at line 9, are there, same page 29, are there others that you have at home that you've not produced? Answer, no. Correct?
That's correct.
And you've reviewed your testimony from that hearing?
Yes, I did.
You have a transcript of it?
Yes.
How many times have you reviewed that testimony?
2 times.
When were those 2 times?
Right after I received them, that would be about 2 months ago. And then before, not last night, but the night before.
And you read that transcript the other night in part to try to be consistent, right?
Yes.
And you also reviewed Stacy Bauer's transcript, correct?
No, I did not review Stacy's transcript. The only transcript I have is my transcript.
You did not review your wife's transcript?
No, I did not.
Did you go through Stacy Bauer's testimony with the prosecutor or with anyone else?
No, I did not.
Did you go through your wife's testimony with the prosecutor or anyone else?
No, I did not.
Did you talk to your wife about her testimony?
Yes.
You talked to her about what questions were asked?
No.
What did you talk to her about the testimony?
Basically, just to make sure that, because they kept questioning the conversation in the hotel room. That's basically what we had talked about.
So how much time did you spend talking to her about this case? Since, let me say, since the time of her testimony in late August.
Half hour.
And when was the last time you talked to her about it?
On the way down here.
And was that the half hour that you spent on it?
Yes.
And there was no other time when you talked about this case since her testimony?
No.
After her testimony in August 2007, you didn't have any conversation with her about her testimony?
We talked some.
Well, how much did you talk?
Not a whole lot.
5 minutes?
Maybe 5-10 minutes, yeah, not a lot.
So 5 to 10 minutes right after her testimony and another half hour on your way down here, right?
Yes.
No other conversations with your wife about this case?
No.
Correct.
That's correct.
So you didn't make any effort to get your story straight?
There was no reason to get stories straight.
I'm sorry, Mr. Klug, you didn't,
I had my testimony, she has her testimony.
you didn't make any effort to get your story straight?
No.
Objection has been asked and answered.
Sustained.
Mr. Klug, you talked for the first time to any prosecutor or law enforcement officer in this case. Well, I'm sorry, that's not true. First time you talked to a prosecutor was July 27th?
It would have been the Friday before the evidentiary hearing. I don't have a calendar.
All right. And if you testified on July 30th, that would be July 27th, true?
Correct.
And that was to Ms. Gabrielle
Yes.
and Mr. Jambois?
Yes.
And then, since your time of your testimony, how many times have you talked to a prosecutor or law enforcement officer?
Let's see. I've probably talked 3 or 4 times to Mr. Jamboy and to Ms. Gabrielle, and then I talked to Brad Gehring, who's a sheriff in Outagamie County, because I was worried about my safety. And then-
Judge, that's,
Again, please try to confine your answer to what's asked.
Okay. And that's, I believe, the only other.
and how much time did you spend with prosecutors preparing for this case?
Maybe half hour to an hour. I don't know the exact time. I wasn't documenting it.
And did you talk to prosecutors during your break? During the break between the time you testified this morning and now? Did you talk to prosecutors?
I talked to Mr. Jamboys, and he told me that I would have to get a hold of my wife to possibly testify.
And again, I don't mean to be rude, but I didn't ask the content. And
Or
again,
be more
I'm
clear.
concerned-
How's that?
Pardon me?
Be more clear, so you know what I need to tell you.
Well, could I have the last question read back, please?
Question, did you talk to prosecutors during your break, during the break between the time you testified and this morning and now? Did you talk to prosecutors?
Yes.
And you recall at the last hearing, I asked you if you spoke to prosecutors during a break, and you told me no.
Objection, it's irrelevant.
Overall,
And you told me no, and you had talked to prosecutors. Remember that?
Yes.
And do you recall at the last hearing, I asked you if you sent flowers to Dawn Cooper, and you told me no. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And that was false as well, right?
I don't understand the question.
I asked you at the last hearing, did you send flowers to Dawn Cooper? You recall that?
I recall.
And page 30, line 7, let's go starting line 8. What did you spend $170 in flowers for? And let me just say, you had spent $170 when you were in St. Louis on your credit card for flowers.
That's correct.
What did you spend $170 in flowers for? Answer, I believe that was sent to the transition team for thanking them for the good job that they had done.
Objection, Your Honor. At this point, this is hearsay. Counsel has not asked the witness here what he spent the $170 on, and he hasn't given him an opportunity to talk about that
you'll
yet.
have to ask the prefatory question.
I'm sorry, I thought that was necessary to the next set of questions, which are, were they sent to Dawn Cooper? And I did ask, I did it a little bit
Go
wrong,
ahead.
sorry. Question, line 11, page 30, was that sent to Dawn Cooper? No. Who was it sent to? I don't recall. It may have been Dawn Cooper, I don't recall. Is that so? So it may have been Dawn Cooper? No.
Objection, Your Honor. I object to all of this. Counsel has not asked this witness any questions yet today about flowers, $170, or Dawn Cooper. He has no prior inconsistent statements. This is hearsay. He's got to ask the witness first about this.
I don't agree with you.
Well, how is it not hearsay?
He asked him if he had sent flowers to Dawn Cooper.
He just asked him now? He's read previous questions. He's not asked this witness any questions about what he did, about $170, about flowers, about anything about that.
Well, and perhaps I will tell you that I was doing something else, but I would say that he inquired of him whether he had testified at the prior hearing, whether he had stated that he had sent flowers to Don Cooper.
Correct. And that's improper because there's no question on the table here today about $170,
Right.
about flowers, about Don Cooper, about anything.
This is
Just-
why I had a certain motion that I filed pre-trial, but
So before he gets to...
No, just,
what I'll do is I'm going to ask him the question that Mr. Jamboy's.
Go ahead.
Did you send Don Cooper flowers in St. Louis?
No.
Do you recall Mr. Jamboy's asking you some questions about sending flowers at the last hearing?
Again, counsel, I request page...
I'm not there yet. Do you recall him asking questions about that?
I don't have a transcript in front of me.
The question is, do you recall him asking any questions about flowers?
Yes.
And what you had done is you sent $170 worth of flowers care of Don Cooper in St. Louis, right?
They were sent to the transition team, and that's what I testified.
And they were addressed to Don Cooper.
They were sent to the transition team. If they were addressed to her, she was part of the transition team. There was probably 10 people on the transition team.
And you testified last time that Dawn is the person you sent those flowers to, right?
Can you read me back my testimony?
Is that the case right now? Was Dawn the person that was on the card that you sent it to?
No, I don't recall.
So no, she was not the person that was on the card that you sent the flowers to?
No.
Okay, page 96, line 5, your statement. And like I said, Dawn was the name that may have been on the card. Right?
How is that inconsistent with, Your Honor, I object, this answer is not inconsistent with the witness's testimony.
what is the page?
It's actually, Your Honor, to put the answer in context, it's the top, bottom page 95 and the top page 96.
And Judge, it's comparing page 30 to page 96. And we'll also get to page 98, line 18 in a moment.
The objection's overruled.
Mr. Klug? You recall saying at the last hearing, like I said, Dawn was the name that may have been on the card?
Again, Your Honor, I object. Now, this statement is even taken out of context and is not inconsistent with the witness's testimony here today.
That's the objection he just made, Your Honor.
No,
But it doesn't make any difference whether it's inconsistent with the testimony today. It can be inconsistent at any time.
it's not inconsistent at any
Well,
time.
his answer that is reported at page 31 of the transcript of July the 30th is, who is the individual that these flowers were sent to? Whose name? Answer, I don't recall. Question, but it wasn't Don Cooper. Answer, no. And then at page 95, on page 96, he said, and like I said, Dawn was the name that may have been on the card.
But it's within the context, Your Honor, of an answer where he's clearly saying,
I don't want to argue about context. That's for the jury to decide. The evidence is there, and it's a legitimate question. So let's go ahead.
And that you just heard the testimony that the judge read, right?
Yes, I did.
And that was when I was questioning you, correct?
Well, which part?
objection.
I read two
don't understand
parts.
the question, Your Honor.
From page 31, where line 9, no, I'm sorry, let's start with line 6. Who is the individual that these flowers were sent to? Whose name? Answer, I don't recall. Question, but it wasn't Don Cooper? No, correct? That's correct. You gave that testimony during my cross-examination, right?
Yes.
And then there was a break, and you spoke with Mr. Jamboys, correct?
I don't recall.
And then during redirect examination, page 96, line 5, you said, and like I said, Dawn was the name that may have been on the card, right?
Okay.
Would you like to read your testimony?
Might be easier than...
Well, tell me, as you sit here right now, which is it?
Which is what?
Did you send the flowers to Dawn or not?
No, they were sent to the transition team.
In care of Dawn? Again, let's go back to that question that was at page 31. In whose name? Was it in Dawn's name?
I don't know because I don't have a card. It's,
Again, at the last hearing on cross-examination, you said, was it sent to Dawn? Your answer was no. Is it now, I don't know, or is it yes, or is it still no?
No. It may have been sent to Dawn because she was one of the people in the transition team, but it was for the whole transition team.
Now, Mr. Klug, the first time you met Mark Jensen was on or about October 1st or 2nd, 1998?
In person, yes.
And that was in Appleton, right?
Yes.
And prior to that time, you had a couple of phone conversations with him, right?
That's correct.
And those phone conversations in total were 15 minutes tops, right?
You know, it could have been longer. You know, it was to talk about the transition.
And you recall testifying last time that it was 15 minutes, right?
Correct.
And that was business conversation, right?
That was 100% business.
Scott McKaig, as you earlier indicated, was the person who hired you.
That's correct.
He was the person who could fire you, right?
Yes.
He was Mark's boss, too.
Yes.
Mark had just been hired at Stiefel Nicholas. He'd only worked there 3 months, you said, right?
Let's see, he would have been probably June, so he would have been at that time 3 months.
And during the time that Mark was in Appleton in October, you only spent about 5 minutes talking with him, correct?
I know it was very busy at that time. You know, it may have been 5 minutes, it may have been longer. You know, he was in the office.
Do you recall giving this the following answer to the following question on July 30th, the year is it 2007, page 13, line 22, question, so how much time did you spend talking with him on October 2nd? Answer, not much, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not much.
Okay.
And again, I don't see how that's inconsistent with the witness's testimony here today, Your Honor.
What's the inconsistency?
Well, he said it could have been more, and I'm just trying to clarify what his parameters set last time were.
Well, it's in now.
And so prior to the time that and then you never saw Mark Jensen in person again until you saw him in St. Louis in November of 1998, right?
That's correct.
And so by the time you got to St. Louis, you had maybe spent 20 minutes 25 minutes talking to Mark Jensen, right?
That's correct.
You'd never had a personal conversation?
No, I had said we had personal conversations. He was the person I was talking to when I made the transition. He was the person I called to find out about the firm, to find out how Stiefel was, what the differences were between Baird. We had conversations.
Business conversations,
That's correct.
not personal conversations.
Right.
And you barely knew him, right?
That's right. I was new to the company.
On the day you got down there was a Thursday, November 5th, right?
Yes,
You had meetings all day, correct?
that's correct.
No real conversation with Mark on that day, right?
Well, there would have been breaks. There may have been chit chat during breaks. You know.
You didn't go out with Mr. Jensen on Thursday night, right?
No,
And you had no significant conversation at any time prior to Friday night, right?
no significant conversation.
And on Friday night, you had a happy hour?
There was a happy hour, yes.
You had 2 Crown and Cokes?
Yes,
And then there was a dinner, correct?
yes,
And that was attended by several hundred people, correct?
that's correct.
And you weren't with Mark Jensen at dinner, right?
No, I think Mark sat at our table.
Your recollection is that you were seated near him?
Yes,
Do you recall any conversation with him over dinner?
I don't, no.
Do you recall at the last hearing, page 19, line 3, question, and are you seated near Mr. Jensen? Answer, I don't recall. Did you know if you were seated by him?
I can't remember.
You drank wine during dinner?
Yes,
2 glasses?
one glass.
How long was the dinner?
The dinner was, normally got over at like 10 o'clock.
How many hours were you seated at the table?
Let's see, 3 to 4 hours.
And you're saying you had 1 glass of wine in 3
Yes.
or 4 hours? Now, you recall at the last hearing, you said you had 1 or 2, is what you admitted.
Well, then if that's in my testimony, it was 1 or 2. You know, you have it in front of you.
But what I'm looking for is the truth, as you want to tell us here.
So it'd be 1 or 2.
Could it have been 3 or 4?
No,
Now, and then you went to this lounge area at about 10:30, right?
correct.
And you were there until 2?
Yes,
And you were drinking a beer, you were drinking beer there?
could have been beer, it could have been Crown Royals, you know, it's a mixture of those.
And you were having a,
Not the beer on the Crown Royal.
Well, no, not that. That would be an interesting conversation.
and you're having a drink every half hour or so, right?
Yeah, I may have. But then I also had, like I had mentioned, that I had tendency to putting Coke with a straw to make it look like there was alcohol in it.
But you don't recall doing that evening, right?
Yes.
Yes, I don't recall.
No, I recall doing that because, you know, I was new to the company. I didn't want to drink a whole lot.
Okay. So well, do you remember that, or are you speculating that you wouldn't have been drinking a lot because you didn't want to say anything foolish or do anything foolish?
No, I didn't want to drink a lot.
My question is,
And you're right, because you're right. I did not want to, it was a long night and wanted to make sure I wasn't drinking too much.
but my real question is, do you remember that, or are you just speculating about it?
No. Well, I do remember, because I always did that, where if it was going to be a cocktail hour.
Mr. Klug, I'm asking if you remember that time, not what you always do, not what you wanted to do. What do you remember from that night? Did you do that or not?
Yes, I did.
Now, you didn't tell us anything about drinking Coke at the last hearing, correct?
That's correct.
And at the last hearing, you indicated that you were drinking beers, right?
Yes.
Right? And you indicated that you were drinking 2 an hour. This is page 22, lines 24 and 25.
Objection, Your Honor, this is not inconsistent with the witness's testimony.
Page 22, line 25, did you say?
Yes. And it gets inconsistent at the top of page 23.
Go ahead.
You're drinking probably 2 an hour, right?
Correct.
And you testified, you gave the following answer to the following question, page 23, line 1, and you were there for about 3.5 hours, right?
Objection. Again, the witness has not been asked here how long he was there, Your Honor.
Well, it depends on what's meant by there. Go ahead.
All right, let me start at page 22, line 24. How many were you drinking every hour? And that referred to beers, right?
You're talking about the testimony from this summer.
Yes.
That's correct.
How many were you drinking every hour? Probably 2 an hour. Question, and you were there for about 3.5 hours, right? Answer, correct.
Yep. So that's correct.
And that would be 7 beers, right?
Correct.
And you didn't say you were drinking any Coke, right?
Correct.
So your testimony last time was that you had 7 beers after the dinner, right?
Yes.
And you've indicated you
Your Honor,
had...
I object. This witness has not been asked how many beers he had after dinner tonight. You know, this prior statement is hearsay
Judge.
unless it's inconsistent.
I did ask him. He said I was drinking Crown Royals and beer, and I switched to Coke.
Your Honor, he was asked. He wasn't asked at the last hearing how many Cokes he had to drink. He was asked how many beers he had to drink. This witness has not been asked at this proceeding how many beers he had to drink that night. I haven't heard it if he was asked that.
I have no problem.
He says, well, this is what I meant about the there. He says, at that time, I would have had a few more beers with the group, and then he gives a recitation about how many beers that he had.
And this witness has not been asked here how many beers he's had to drink. I mean, he's not been asked today, how many beers did you have to drink?
Judge,
And-
I'm just going to ask the question if it'll move things on.
Go ahead. Good.
How many beers did you have to drink?
Okay, well, if it was 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock and it was 2 an hour, that's between 7 and 8.
And that's how many beers you had that night,
Correct.
in addition to 2 Crown Royals
Correct.
and a glass or 2 of wine.
Correct.
So 11 or 12 drinks, is that what we end up with? 10 to 12 drinks?
Let's say it's 2 crowns, that'd be 4, and so 11.
7 or 8 beers, you said.
Correct. 11 to 12. Okay.
11 to 12. Were you intoxicated?
No, I was not.
And so, as of 10, and at 10:30, you're in the lounge area. You say Mark Jensen's there, right?
Yes, he was.
Kelly Labonte is there, right?
Yes.
Kelly Labonte's husband, Mark Riemann, is there, right?
I don't recall.
You don't know one way or another.
No.
Dawn Cooper was there.
Yes.
You were flirting with Dawn Cooper that night?
No.
Several people from Ohio were there that you were talking to.
Yes.
Ron Ruck was there.
Yes.
You knew Ron Ruck real well because you worked with him every day.
Yes.
Other people that you had met at this conference?
Yes.
You had been trying to meet as many people as possible at this conference, right?
Yes.
And so how many other people were you talking to in that lounge that night,
Well, there was,
besides the people I named?
can't recall,
5 or 10 other people?
probably.
Maybe more?
I can't recall.
The bar was crowded,
Yes,
and you were doing a lot of socializing,
correct.
and you didn't spend that much time specifically with Mark until bar time.
That's correct.
And at 2 o'clock, how many people were still in the bar?
I can't recall.
A few dozen?
I don't know.
Can you say if it was more than 40?
I don't know.
And then there was a certain amount of breaking up of this conversation, right? Breaking up of everybody leaving the bar and saying goodnight and talking about the next day and exchanging phone numbers, those kind of things, right?
I don't know what phone numbers would be exchanged. I don't know.
You tell me what happened, Mr. Klug, at 2 o'clock with all the people that were in the bar.
Are you talking about my conversation with Mark?
No, I'm
Jensen?
talking about, there's a bar full of people, and the bar closes, so you all have to leave, right?
Yes.
That's why you don't leave the bar voluntarily, they have to kick you out, true?
They shut the lights off and we ended up out in the lobby, in the coffee bar.
You're being kicked out, right? When the lights go off, you're kicked out.
They shut it down, yes. They close, that's their hours.
I understand. And so, what happens with all the people in the bar? What do you remember?
I would have assumed they would go to the room, I don't know.
Did you talk to other people as you left?
I don't recall.
And Dawn Cooper was one of those people, right?
Yes,
And she stayed up with you and Mark, right?
I believe so, yes.
You believe Dawn Cooper stayed up with you? Okay. And she had just gone through a recent divorce, right?
Yes,
She was talking about her divorce, correct?
yes,
With you and Mark?
correct.
And she had been drinking a pretty good amount, right?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Mark trying to discourage her from driving home?
That I don't recall.
Could have happened, you just don't remember today.
I don't remember that part of the conversation.
And Dawn Cooper stayed up until you went up to your room at about 2:30, right?
I believe so.
So it was you and Dawn and Mark talking, and then you went up to your room at 2:30, true?
Correct.
And you had a conversation at 2:34 with your wife, correct?
Yes,
And you went up to the room because you were expecting a call from your wife, right?
yes,
You assumed that she was going to call you, right?
yes.
And did you know she was going to call right at 2:30?
No,
You just figured she'd call in the middle of the night, right?
that's when the bar closing might have been.
You're closing?
You said the 2:30, the bar closing time.
Right. So she assumed that you'd be out of the bar until the end of the night?
Yeah, in the hotel lounge, yeah.
Okay. And you didn't talk to her at all during this conversation at 2:34 about Mark Jensen, correct?
When I was up in the room, I had told her at that point that that Mark had been talking about killing his wife. And I had told her, because I couldn't believe what was going on, so I went back down to the lobby. And then we started drinking coffee at that point.
Here was my question. You didn't talk to her during this first conversation at 2:34 about Mark Jensen, and it sounds like you disagree with that statement. Is that right?
Yes,
Yes, you disagree with me.
yep.
And your position is that you had been talking about it before the conversation at 2:34. Is that right?
Objection, talking about what? With whom?
Talking about We're talking with Mark Jensen about Mark killing his wife.
Yes.
Say again? Oh, I see what you're saying, okay. Do you understand the question?
Repeat the question.
You told your wife during this conversation at 2:34 that you had been talking with Mark Jensen, and Mark Jensen had been talking about killing his wife.
Yes.
And at that time, Don Cooper was still downstairs with you, as we just established, right?
Yes.
So Don Cooper would have heard that conversation. Is that right?
You know, I don't,
right?
Dawn was not there at that time. I don't believe that Dawn was, Mark and I were the only two that were talking about when Mark wanted to do that.
You just told me that Dawn was there.
She was there she was not there. She was not there.
Why did you tell me she was there?
I know I'm getting my times confused because I don't have a,
Okay. Now, do you recall being asked the following question and giving the following answer on July 30th, 2007? And in this first...
Where are we at?
Objection. We need the page and the
Oh, I'm
line.
sorry.
Right.
I thought, all right, page 69, line 19. It's a long day, I apologize, Mr. Chamberlain.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Page 69 and what line?
Line 19, question. And in this first conversation at 2:34, you did not talk about Mark Jensen, correct? Answer, I don't believe so.
okay?
Well, did you talk to her in this first conversation at 2:34 about Mark Jensen or not?
I know I went up to my room, and then we had talked, and then I went back down to the lobby.
And the question is, did you talk to her about Mark Jensen at 2:34? The last time you testified under oath that you did not believe that you had that conversation at 2:34.
That's correct.
And is that what you believe today, too?
Yes, yes.
So you did not talk to her in this first conversation about Mark Jensen?
No.
Right? And when you went up to your room, you didn't know exactly when your wife would call, right?
No,
Correct?
no, but I assumed at the end of the night.
Okay. But you didn't know if that was going to be within minutes, or it would take an hour, whatever, right?
No,
Correct?
That's
No,
correct.
You're ending your questions with right and correct, and then he's responding, and it makes it unclear as to what the response is.
I know, it is. That is, I don't remember what the last question was. Are you okay, Mr. Klug?
I just don't know what you're asking me.
Well, what I was asking you is, did you talk to Mark Jensen, about Mark Jensen in this conversation at 2:34 with your wife or not?
It's been asked and answered, Your Honor.
Well,
Now he's
it
expressing
had-
confusion.
Well, that's because the questions are confusing.
It's easier to just do it again than to haggle over it. So the question is whether or not during the call from your wife at 2:34, whether you discussed anything about Mark Jensen's statements regarding poisoning his wife.
At that point, when I went back to the room, had talked to my wife, and had told her that I was going back down because I was talking to Mark, and at that time, at that first conversation, he may not have said anything about killing his wife.
And my next question was, did you know how long you'd be up in your room when you went to get the call from your wife that you expected?
No, I knew it would not be long because I wanted to go back down and talk to Mark some more.
But you didn't know when exactly your wife was calling, right?
No.
You had no plan that it would be at 2:30.
No.
And so why was Mark still downstairs?
Objection calls for speculation on the part of this witness.
Stay.
Why did you expect Mark to be downstairs?
Objection, there's no evidence that this witness expected Mark to be downstairs.
He just said that.
Oh, he did? Okay.
I-
I withdraw the objection.
I won't swear to it, but I thought he did, so, go ahead.
Well, I know I was going back down to see Mark, and we talked about having some coffee, because there was a coffee bar after the bar had closed.
But why would he stay indefinitely when he didn't know when your call would be?
I don't know why Mark would have stayed there, other than maybe he wanted to talk. I don't know.
Or maybe he was down there talking to Don Cooper, right?
He may have been. I don't know. I don't recall that part of it.
And what was this coffee bar? What did that look like?
Coffee pots on a table.
You're not saying there's like a separate cafe?
Oh, no, it was like the hotel set up a spot for coffee. It was not a cafe per se.
Okay. And then you were back talking to your wife in the room. At 3:38 a.m., right?
That's correct.
So it was less than an hour that you were back downstairs with Mark, right?
That's correct.
And any conversation that you may have had with Mark Jensen regarding his wife would have been between the time you finished your call with your wife at 2:34 and being back in your room at 3:38.
That's
right?
correct.
And you don't know whether or not Don Cooper was there when you returned to where Mark Jensen was.
No, I remember it was just Mark and I at that point.
Okay.
We were sitting in chairs in the lobby. It was very dark.
I didn't hear the last thing you said.
It was very dark. It was like the lights were out, per se. It was.
And you don't recall, well, you can't tell me exactly when Don Cooper left, right?
No. Well, if you had said that Mark was talking her out of leaving, well, then he must not have been successful because she was not at the conversation that Mark and I were having.
Or you could be wrong, right? Right, that's another possibility?
No, I testified that that was the truth.
But the question is, how is your memory on these things? And you don't remember if Don Cooper was there between 2:30 or 2 o'clock and 2:30, right?
Right, but I do remember the point about Mark telling me what he wanted to do. That is very crystal clear.
Now, so the first time you ever talked to your wife about this is supposedly at 3:38, right?
That's correct.
And you have a 4-minute conversation with her.
Yes.
And you get in a fight with her, right?
I had assumed it was a fight. It may have been a disagreement.
I'm asking you what you remember, Mr. Klug. You had a fight with your wife in that conversation at 3:38, right?
I don't consider it a fight. We may have, we were talking at that point.
Was it a disagreement?
It may have been because of
Was it a disagreement,
yes,
Mr. Klug?
yes,
Okay. And did you have an argument?
yes,
And she started out this phone conversation at 3:38 that lasted 4 minutes. She started out by saying, "Why are you out so late, Ed?" Right?
that's correct.
And then you had an argument about why you were out, right?
Yes.
And your wife was concerned that you were out on the town, right?
No, she was concerned after I had told her what Mark was planning on doing, that I would associate with someone.
Objection. Counsel asked the witness a question as to what she said. He has a right to answer it.
Judge, I didn't ask.
Let's finish, please.
My wife was concerned how I could be out with somebody who was talking about killing his wife, and that two educated men would sit out at that time of the morning talking about that. She did not want me to go down there and get involved with him because she did not like the man.
So you're saying your wife wasn't concerned that you were out in the town?
I was not out in the town, I was in the hotel lobby.
Your wife was where, in Appleton, Wisconsin?
Yes,
She didn't know what you were doing, right?
I was at a conference. She knew exactly what I was doing.
Your wife wasn't there. She didn't know if you were with somebody else, right?
I was with other people, yes.
Mr. Klug, and was she concerned that you were in a bar where there's women?
Yes.
And was she concerned about you possibly having an affair?
No.
And you say that she wasn't worried about you being out in the town.
Objection. How is
Your
this witness?
questions- Yeah, your questions, the last three, all are about the thought processes of his wife. Now, if you're asking, did she express concern over those things, that's one thing, but he has no way of knowing, I suppose.
That's fair. Did she
Just think-
express that concern that you were out in the town?
No, like I had repeated, if they want to read that back, what she was concerned about.
Judge,
Objection. Counsel asked the witness.
But now he's.
I'm making
now
an
just
objection,
quiet,
Mr.
quiet, quiet. It is also correct that the witness is expanding beyond what is necessary to answer the question. So again, I would ask you to try to just answer the question.
Okay, Your Honor, I'm
Okay?
sorry.
Go ahead and ask the question.
did she express a concern that you're on the town?
Yes.
Did she express a concern that you're in a bar where there's women?
Yes.
Been asked and answered, Your Honor.
Well, no, because the other question was the one to which you objected.
You just
Before that, you asked.
Let's not argue about it. Just go ahead and finish up your questions.
Well, I certainly wouldn't be in a bar with just men. If that's what you're trying to
Again,
ask.
Just answer the question which is asked, okay? Ask a question, please.
Was she concerned that you were in the bar about women?
Did she express concern?
Did she express the concern that you're in a bar with men?
No.
She expressed a concern about you being in a bar with women.
Yes.
And she expressed that concern, and she expressed, because she didn't want you to have an affair, right?
No.
She didn't express a concern about not wanting you to have an affair?
I don't know what she would have wanted at that point.
No, the question was whether she told you that she was concerned about your having an affair.
No, I was not having an affair.
No.
Did she?
Did she say anything to you about that she was worried that you were going to or were having an affair?
No, she was not worried about that.
Well, I'm going to express concern that the day is done, I think.
Oh, Judge, can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead. You may have finish this
finish.
topic and
Yeah,
then
I wanna-
we'll stop.
Do you recall, Mr. Klug, making the following statement at page 43, line 25? Her concern was the fact that I was out, and I'm out of town, and there, as you know, when you've been in a bar, there's women. She did not want me to have an affair. I mean, that's what a question. So did she express that concern? Answer, yes.
Okay.
So in fact, she did express a concern about you having an affair in this phone conversation, correct?
Objection. Which phone conversation are we talking about? There's been
Well, that...
the one at 2:34, the one at... I don't know which one.
Just a moment. Why don't you answer that question, sir?
Then I guess maybe she was concerned.
No. The question is, do you recall which phone conversation, well, strike that. Is it evident from the transcript what was being asked at that time? We'll pick this up tomorrow. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Let's stop and please, again, don't talk about the case. And again, it's most important that you not read, listen to, or watch any account of the trial. And again, you have your list of publications I don't want you to read and stations I don't want you to watch. And also anything that appears on some other channel or some other publication, turn the page, turn the channel, whatever is necessary, so that you not be affected by that. Any question? All right, then I'm going to turn over your belongings to the bailiffs, and you'll find them in your room in the morning.
On your own.
Yeah. I suppose that's a good thing. I'm going to ask that you come in at 8:55. Is that convenient for everybody? Okay, we'll see you tomorrow.
Please all rise.
All right, is it evident from the transcript, the impeaching questions, where they're coming from in terms of which telephone call?
I think it is. I'll have to go back. I think it's one of those situations where it's a couple pages earlier, so I'll get that cleaned up.
Well, all right, but I don't want to have an extended discussion about it in the morning. I want to get right to work.
Oh, no, I mean, I'll just, yeah.
What page were we at when we stopped? Is that close?
She's at the bottom of, top of 44 is where
You can
it's
step
at.
down, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Judge, I'd like an order that Mr. Klug not discuss his testimony with the prosecution.
Oh, you know, Judge, this is the second time now this request has been made, that I not be permitted to talk to witnesses. Since when?
It's
is it that-
mid-examination. It's mid-examination.
I understand that, but I've never heard of that before, that
Well,
a
you know, I
lawyer is
have.
not permitted to talk to witnesses?
Not in mid-examination. I will tell you that after the close of the cross-examination, we will, if you ask, we'll take a break, and you're welcome to discuss matters then, unless there's some good cause shown, but not in the middle of the examination. Anything else?
No.
No, Judge.
Okay, thank you.